the lush landscapes of Colombia, a country rich in culture and beauty, yet entangled in the complex web of the narcotics trade. Amidst this paradoxical paradise emerges a figure both revered and reviled, the king of cocaine. In the verdant landscapes of Rionegro, Colombia, 1949, the story of Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria began. Born to a schoolteacher and a peasant, his world was steeped in simplicity, far from the future luxury that would define his existence. This backdrop of humble beginnings is crucial in understanding the man he would become. Picture a young Pablo, his demeanor a blend of quiet introspection and a barely contained, burgeoning ambition, a stark contrast to the unassuming life of his family. As he grew, the vibrant and chaotic streets of Medellín became his canvas. Here, amidst the hustle of everyday Colombians, young Escobar's ambitions began to take shape. The city, a melting pot of culture and socio-economic disparities, offered a poignant glimpse into the inequalities that plagued Colombian society. It was this environment that sowed the seeds of Escobar's future pursuits. In these early years, Pablo was known for his charisma and intelligence, traits that made him stand out. He was a born leader, albeit one whose path was not yet clear. His initial forays into small-time crime, such as stealing gravestones and selling fake lottery tickets, were indicative of a mind that was always searching, always calculating. It was as if the streets of Medellín were both a playground and a classroom for Escobar, each day a lesson in the harsh realities of life and the opportunities it presented for those daring enough to seize them. Yet, despite these early signs of a darker path, Escobar was also remembered for his warmth and generosity within his community. He was a paradox in the making, a man who could navigate the complexities of Medellín's social fabric with ease, endearing himself to many while quietly building the foundations of an empire that would one day shake the world. As the 1970s unfurled, a new chapter in Colombia's history was being written. The narcotics trade, particularly the trade of cocaine, was budding, its tendrils reaching far beyond the Colombian borders. Cocaine, once a luxury indulgence for the wealthy and powerful, was now finding its way into the lives of ordinary people across continents, predominantly feeding the burgeoning demand in the United States. In the midst of this seismic shift, Pablo Escobar emerged as a pivotal figure. His transition from small-time criminal to a kingpin of the drug trade was not just serendipitous, it was a calculated move. Escobar possessed a unique blend of charm and intimidation, a duality that served him well in his ascent. His charisma enabled him to forge relationships, while his propensity for ruthlessness ensured loyalty and instilled fear. The formation of the Medellín Cartel during this period was not merely the establishment of a new business venture. It was, more significantly, a bold and defiant statement in the criminal underworld. Escobar, alongside his partners, crafted an organization that was as sophisticated as it was shadowy. The early days of the cartel were marked by clandestine meetings in nondescript locations, where strategies were devised and alliances forged. These meetings, often held in dimly lit back rooms or secluded estates, laid the groundwork for what would become an empire that controlled an overwhelming majority of the global cocaine market. During this time, Escobar's acumen for business and leadership became increasingly evident. He was not just building a cartel, he was constructing a meticulously organized, vertically integrated operation that handled every aspect of the cocaine trade, from production to distribution. This level of control was unprecedented, and it demonstrated Escobar's understanding of not just the drug trade, but also of supply chain logistics and international business. Moreover, the cartel's rise was indicative of the socio-political climate of Colombia and the global context of the time. The demand for cocaine in the United States provided a lucrative opportunity, but it was the political turmoil and economic disparity in Colombia that offered the perfect breeding ground for the cartel's operations. Escobar capitalized on this, leveraging both the weaknesses in the Colombian state and the insatiable demand from the north. The 1980s heralded an era where the name Pablo Escobar transcended the realm of the narcotics trade to become a symbol of both fear and fascination. This was the decade when Escobar, at the helm of the Medellín Cartel, redefined the contours of power and wealth in the criminal world. The operations of the Medellín Cartel during this period were nothing short of prodigious. It was a sprawling, intricate network that extended from the coca-producing regions of Peru and Bolivia, through the processing labs hidden deep in the Colombian jungle, and out to the vast consumer markets of the United States, primarily Miami. This was not merely a drug operation. It was a sophisticated multinational enterprise, one that exhibited both the shrewd business sense and the ruthless tactics of Escobar. Escobar's wealth in this era reached mythic proportions. His fortune was not just evident in the numbers, billions of dollars in revenue, but in the tangible displays of opulence that surrounded him. Imagine vast estates dotting the Colombian landscape, like his famous Hacienda Nápoles, which stretched over thousands of acres. These estates were more than homes. They were symbols of unbridled power, complete with lavish amenities such as private zoos, housing exotic animals and fleets of luxury vehicles. The extent of Escobar's extravagance was perhaps most visible in his infamous parties. These gatherings were a surreal blend of Colombia's elite and the underworld, a microcosm where the lines between legality and criminality blurred. At these events, the who's who of society would mingle with cartel members, underlining the extent to which Escobar had embedded himself in the fabric of Colombian society. These parties were not just social events. They were displays of power, designed to impress, intimidate, and build alliances. However, beneath this veneer of extravagance lay a grim reality. Escobar's empire was built on a foundation of violence and bloodshed. The wealth and power he flaunted were inextricably linked to the countless lives destroyed by his operations, whether through addiction, violence, or corruption. The reach of his influence meant that few in Colombia remained untouched by the consequences of his actions. As the late 1980s approached, a significant shift began to manifest in the ongoing saga of Pablo Escobar and his Medellín Cartel. The relentless tide that had carried the cartel to the heights of power started to turn, marking the beginning of what would be a dramatic decline for Escobar and his empire. During this period, the Colombian government, previously beleaguered and often outmaneuvered by the cartel, began to regain its footing. Bolstered significantly by aid and support from the United States, which had its own vested interest in curbing the flow of narcotics, the government launched a more vigorous and strategic offensive against the cartel. This campaign was not just a series of law enforcement operations. It was a concerted effort that combined military, political, and legal strategies. As the pressure mounted, the once seemingly invincible structure of the Medellín Cartel began to reveal its vulnerabilities. The cartel, which had operated with a combination of fear, loyalty, and bribery, started to experience fractures. High-ranking members, once staunch allies of Escobar, began to defect or were captured, leading to a significant erosion of the cartel's operational strength. Additionally, rival cartels and vigilante groups began to capitalize on these weaknesses, further destabilizing Escobar's control. The most telling sign of this changing landscape was the isolation that Escobar began to experience. The man who had once held sway over vast criminal networks and enjoyed considerable protection found himself increasingly cornered. His movements became restricted, and his ability to operate with impunity was severely diminished. This isolation was not just physical, it was also a symbolic representation of the dwindling power he held. The pursuit of Escobar, which had once seemed a near impossible task, transformed into an unyielding manhunt. The Colombian government, along with US authorities, committed substantial resources to tracking down the drug lord. This hunt was more than a law enforcement operation. It was a mission with significant political and social implications. For the Colombian state, capturing Escobar was essential to restoring its authority and legitimacy, which had been severely compromised by the cartel's influence. As the 1980s drew to a close, the narrative of Escobar and the Medellín Cartel took on a new tone. It was no longer a story of unchallenged dominance, but one of a gradual yet inexorable decline. The tide that had once carried Escobar to the heights of criminal power was now receding, leaving behind a legacy of violence, but also setting the stage for a crucial chapter in Colombia's fight against narcotics trafficking. December 2nd, 1993 stands as a pivotal date in the annals of Colombian and global history. This day marked the culmination of a long and tumultuous journey as Pablo Escobar, the notorious leader of the Medellín Cartel, met his end on a rooftop in Medellín. This moment was more than just the demise of a man. It signified the end of an era that had seen Escobar rise from obscurity to become one of the world's most feared and powerful drug lords. Escobar's death was the result of a relentless manhunt that had consumed the Colombian government and international agencies, particularly the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA. The operation that led to his downfall was a testament to the extensive efforts and resources that had been mobilized to bring him to justice. As Escobar was cornered on that fateful rooftop, it was clear that the empire he had built through a combination of cunning, brutality, and wealth was finally collapsing. The significance of this event cannot be overstated. For Colombians, it represented a long-awaited reprieve from the violence and instability that had plagued the country for over a decade. The Medellín Cartel, under Escobar's leadership, had not only monopolized the cocaine trade, but had also challenged the very sovereignty of the Colombian state. Its operations had led to widespread corruption, countless deaths, and a culture of fear that permeated every level of society. In the aftermath of his death, Colombia faced a period of reflection and rebuilding. The power vacuum left by the fall of the Medellín Cartel led to shifts in the narcotics trade and changes in the dynamics of criminal activities within the country. However, the legacy of Pablo Escobar and his cartel remained a contentious and complex topic. For some, Escobar was still seen as a Robin Hood-like figure, a man who had provided for the poor and stood up against a corrupt establishment. For many others, he was the epitome of a ruthless criminal, whose actions had brought untold suffering to thousands. Internationally, Escobar's death was seen as a significant victory in the war on drugs. However, it also raised questions about the effectiveness of the global narcotics policy and the role of international cooperation in combating drug trafficking. The end of Pablo Escobar's reign did not signify the end of the narcotics trade, nor did it resolve the underlying social and economic issues that had fueled its rise. Instead, it closed a chapter on one of the most infamous figures in the history of organized crime, leaving behind a legacy that continues to be debated and analyzed. His life and death remain a stark reminder of the complex interplay between crime, poverty, power, and politics in the modern world.